Higher education in America is in trouble. We welcome Dr. Stanley K. Ridgley to talk about this critical situation. Welcome to Saving America, and this is your host, Dr. David D. Shine. Dr. Stanley K. Ridgley is clinical full professor of management at Drexel University's LeBeau College of Business. That's in Philadelphia, next door to where I went to college. He is a former military intelligence officer. He received the George S. Patton Award for leadership from the 7th Army NCO Academy. In addition to his teaching, Dr. Ridgley lectures widely in the United States and internationally. He's a frequent contributor to national media, including Newsmax, which I'm a regular viewer of, by the way, and American Greatness. He's here today to talk about his new book, Brutal Minds, the Dark World of Left-Wing Brainwashing in Our Universities. We welcome him for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thanks a lot, David. It's good to be here. It's a real pleasure, and I'm delighted to talk about the issues that are at the forefront of many of our conversations and our public discourse on our universities. It's a complex set of problems, but I do believe that Brutal Minds goes a long way in tackling some of the most salient.
Sounds like a winner, and that's why we've invited you today to answer our infamous three questions for Saving America. So number one, what do you see as the current problems with higher education in America?
Well, that's a really broad-based question. It provides me with a lot of latitude. But I will say that the universities and colleges in the United States have a lot of problems that are endemic to, any large organization. But that's not really what I think is being asked here. I think, what are the problems with higher education that impact the stakeholders, students, parents, donors, alumni? And I think that that's a very concrete set of problems that may surprise, the answers to which may surprise some people. Most often we think of the old liberal conservative divide with regard to the faculty and how universities are so far canted to the left with regard to the faculty. Well, that's kind of ho-hum stuff now. We all know that. What is unique now about today's issues is the problem is really not with the faculty. Sure, we have our gadfly left-wing faculty and they do all kinds of crazy things. The real problem in higher education now is the bureaucracy. And when I say the word bureaucracy, eyes kind of glaze over. But no, this bureaucracy is an identifiable group of people on every college campus, university in America that has a desire and an ideology to undermine the university as we know it. The university as we know it, we cherish it, is as a repository of hard-won knowledge, is a repository of the best that has been thought and said, passed on to future generations, right? And of course, there's the project of knowledge generation with utilizing the scientific method, reason, logic, scientific method, humanism, and progress. Well, that is our vision of the university now. The groups of people I've talked about in the bureaucracy, identifiable, naming names, and their motivation has a very different view of the university, and they are working actively to undermine the substance of the university and its structure today and transform that. In fact, excuse me, their motto is boldly transforming higher education. And this is a group of bureaucrats that's outside the purview of the faculty. That, I see, is the main problem that faces us in the university. I'm as a faculty member, parents, students, and concerned faculty.
Well, it's a really interesting area. So how did we get there? I mean, I remember in earlier days that you had the predictably left, like the Ivy League, Berkeley in California, a few other schools, Oberlin, were a few schools that were always mentioned as being way out in left field. But the most universities, especially your big state universities, Penn State, Temple in Philadelphia, Michigan State, so forth, were regarded as more mainstream, middle of the road. So how did we get to where we are today, where it seems that higher ed is overly dominated by these pro-communist, pro-socialist sources?
Well, the source of this is quite clear. The rot began in earnest about 2 decades ago, and it comes out of the education schools. on the college campuses, which are universally considered the buck privates, the bottom feeders of higher education, with good reason. But about 2 decades ago, the folks in the higher education, in the education schools, came up with a brilliant idea. I have to give credit where credit is due. This is a brilliant idea. They said, let us create advanced degrees and call them these vague names: higher education administration, educational leadership, student affairs. Let's create these advanced degrees and then create jobs on the college campuses for which these degrees will prepare you. And so it began this way about 2 decades ago, that education schools began generating these graduate degrees and these graduates of these education programs to fill these slots in the universities and the colleges. Now, you might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is that education schools were long ago permeated with crypto-Maoist philosophy and ideology. I say crypto-Maoist, and I mean that very clearly, and I mean that literally, in the guise of Paulo Freire, who was a Brazilian crypto-Maoist philosopher who wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed in 1970. This is the virtual Bible of education schools. Now, Paulo Freire was not an original thinker. He got most of his stuff direct from Mao Zedong's educational theory. Look at the time frame we're talking about here. This is the period of the Cultural Revolution in China, and virtually everyone on the left who was anyone wanted to be a Maoist, and Paulo Freire was no different. So the education school people said, aha, we can't say Mao, we can't say that, but what we can do is we can latch on to this third world Brazilian educator by the name of Paulo Freire, who's really a crypto-Maoist, and we can import his doctrine into the colleges and universities, basically into our education programs. And now we have these programs whereby we teach these doctrines to teachers, sending those teachers down to the secondary schools and primary schools, but also sending now graduate students and graduate degree holders into the bureaucracy in the universities. So where the universities really ignore the education school and what we have to say, but now they can't, because the bureaucrats are all educated, most of them are educated in our own programs. And this is how the education schools have exerted control over the bureaucracy, far out of proportion as to what one would otherwise expect. So that's the source of this. Now, this accelerated in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd, and this was an opportunity. And leftists, whatever you may say about them, they never let an opportunity go to pass. And these opportunists latched onto this and said, hey, we know there's no racism on college. Well, there's very little racism, if any, on college campuses, as Harvard's Randall Kennedy said. Universities are the least racist places in America. But what we can do, we being the education bureaucrats, we can say, hey, we need to institute anti-racism programs here on our campus to fight racism, even though there's really hardly any racism worthy of the word. And we can expand our bureaucracy, we can extend our control. And the most insidious part of this is the vehicle by which they've been doing this is the Anti-Racist Task Force. Now, if you look at these Anti-Racist Task Force reports, all of them, virtually all of them, call for the institution of an academic freedom committee, which is composed of some faculty and diversity, equity, inclusion people, anti-racist people, bureaucrats, to oversee the faculty, the curriculum, the syllabi, and research, and determine what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Now, all of this is fact. It's all in the public record, and I chronicle all of this in my book, Brutal Minds, which is forthcoming, and which should really make me very popular on the college campuses.
Well, let's move to our question number 3. So what do we do as human beings? I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent.
Yeah.
I want my kids to get the 3 R's. And one of the things that's gotten kind of lost in the current mess is that we seem to have lost the focus, especially in K through 12, of basic education. And as they say in the old-fashioned days, reading, writing, arithmetic, which of course don't begin with R's, but we'll work from there. And so how do we, as members of the community and taxpayers, get things back on track?
Well, there are a number of stakeholders that with different, different venues, in which they operate and with different tools of leverage that are available to them. Students, for instance, parents, donors, alumni, people, faculty like myself, and some staff. Students are at the basic level, the basic unit, and these are the students who are being abused, who are being targeted by what is called anti-racist ideology, which is hardly anti-racist in any sense of the word. In fact, it's the codification of paranoia into a conspiracy theory, and it's being propagated and forced on students, staff, and faculty in the form of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, which utilizes, and I don't say this lightly, utilizes psychological manipulation techniques, behavior modification techniques, and coercive persuasion, because otherwise no one would accept the doctrine that's on offer. It has to be pushed and it has to be carefully curated so no contending ideas are introduced into the workshop space. Students can recognize when they're being targeted with this sort of thing when they're invited or told to go to a workshop that utilizes language like difficult dialogues and courageous conversations, brave spaces, safe spaces. This is the lingo that tells you you're moving into a threat situation and a situation where psychological manipulation and behavior modification will be inflicted on you. Students should be on the lookout for that. And I will tell you, these workshops typically violate civil rights, Title IX, Title VII, and basic human rights and protections as codified in the federal regulations on protections on human experimentation. If a student is told to go to one of these workshops and is not offered informed consent form to sign saying, hey, what's going to happen in here, and you're not offered, you don't have to go. And if you are offered this and you do sign it and you go in there, I would suggest that you record everything that is told to you, that is offered. And so for later on vetting, if there's anything that, if you're attacked, so to speak, if you're attacked because of your skin color. And I will say that this is, if I can use a moment to get into the basics of it, the ideas that are being propagated here is that you are a villain or a victim by virtue of superficial characteristics, your skin color, where you were born, where you've lived, and that is non-negotiable. That's when you walk into the room. And if you do not accept that, then you are labeled a resistor, and right, you will be targeted for additional attention. So that's the student situation. Parents need to understand that basically bureaucrats on the college campus despise parents. They say this to themselves when they think that no one is listening. It's in their literature. They think that parents are toxic, that they don't want the helicopter parents. You've heard that term. They don't want you hanging around. They don't want you asking questions. Well, I would say ask lots of questions and be specific, and don't take the bureaucrats' vague aspirational language as being what's actually happening on the college campus. A good measure of this is that what happens on, there's what's called a parents portal, whereby the schools will talk to the parents and let them know what's happening. Virtually nothing of worth goes on that parents portal. My measure of something is whether it's toxic or not, is if it's not something that's going to appear on a parents portal and it never will, this probably shouldn't be on the college campus to begin with.
That sounds like a promising direction. And I think we do have some encouraging signs. I think Glenn Youngkin's election as governor of Virginia is a sign of that. The 500 parents that showed up at the Loudoun County School Board meeting. Yep. So I think this will probably air after the election, but with the upcoming election, I think it's going to be a message that it's time to chill out and get things back to a more normal basis. That doesn't mean the discussion needs to end. It just means the discussion needs to be a whole lot more balanced, and we need to stop this blame game, victimizing, and a lot of what's going on. Well, we're definitely looking forward to your book. Dr. Ridgley, tell our audience how they can get more information about you.
Oh, well, you can go to my website, which is the same name as my book, brutalminds.com. That's www.brutalminds.com. You can see all about the book, see my other writings on the issue. You can order the book from there. The book is being published by Humanics books, and it's out March 21st, but you can pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, of any other of these popular sites. Everywhere fine books are found.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today on Saving America. This is Dr. David D. Shine, and thank you, our audience, for joining us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite platform.